I think it probably was, but I think he needed that to be able to kind of come to terms with his career and being able to stop. He's so driven, loves the competition, likes challenges. So that's kind of what it took. But I'm very glad, both for him and I think for the sport, that we're going to have this moment tomorrow where he's going to be able to be properly, I think, honored, sent off. What happened in the Davis Cup, that was his own choice to play Davis Cup in Malaga last year. It was inevitably a little bit of a letdown because of just the way it all ended, and them losing to the Netherlands the way they did. It was late night, kind of felt impromptu. This will be grandiose. Pretty sure Roger's going to be there, almost certain. You're going to have the next generation that he's been so involved with, like Alcaraz. And you're going to have this place where he had a lot of ups, but he also had a few downs. And the public took a while to really re-embrace him after those early years for a lot of reasons, which I go into in my book quite a lot, actually. But I think this is going to be outstanding, whether the roof's closed or open. And I think he really deserves it. It's one of the most extraordinary feats in the history of sports. There's no question. 14 French Opens is, even to me, I was there for all of them. I just spent 2 years writing this book, and I'm still coming to grips with how crazy that is. And I wonder how, John and Mark feel about that, because it's truly extraordinary to be able to rinse and repeat like that.
Yeah, let's go to Mark Gellard, coach of Magdalene. Mark, think about 14 major titles at one precise location. Put that into words for us.
Well, as Chris said, I don't know if you can really. I think what Rafa did here is, it was obviously unprecedented, but I'm interested because at some point that record will be broken. I believe, like all records in sports tend to get broken, and we don't think they will be. I don't think anyone would have imagined the possibility that Sampras's 14 slams would have been overtaken by 3 people as quickly as they have been. So it's an incredible record, and I think Andre Agassi said it took everything he had and more to win one, and to do what Rafa's done, winning 14, is just incredible. So I think he's just such a great ambassador for the game, and I think as coaches is probably the one we use the most out of the big 3, as someone that we want to sort of encourage our players, our students to emulate.
And John, your thoughts on the great Rafa Nadal?
Well, they didn't leave me much to work with here. They said all the highlighted points. I mean, I think, probably echoing Mark's sentiment, the most significant contribution to the game that Rafa has made, I think, has come as a testament of just how he viewed it and how he played it. He viewed the game as his life, and he played every match as if it was his life on the line. And I think that level of commitment to anything is amazing. It's admirable. So his 14, titles here at Roland Garros is, I think, indicative of his level of commitment and dedication to be willing to die on the court every single point of every single match. And I don't know if I agree with Mark on the topic of that it will be broken over time. I don't know. We could debate that one offline, buddy, but I don't know.
We might not be alive to see it, but it may happen. Yeah. Chris, go for it.
I don't want to interrupt John. John, go ahead if you're more to say.
No. I'm complete.
I just spent 2 years sort of living with this, night and day. So I guess I have too much to say at this point. But a couple of things really struck me in my reporting for the book, and I covered Rafa for the New York Times for almost 20 years from the beginning of his career. I met him at Wimbledon in 2003, and what struck me when I first saw him was how competitively mature he was. He wasn't so mature in his entirety of his game, but he was such an amazing point-by-point competitor at 17 already, which was not the case for Federer or Djokovic, for that matter, or honestly any player that I can recall. Maybe Michael Chang had a little bit of that at the same age. I think that might be something you could compare to, or Leighton Hewitt, something competitively. I didn't see Connors at 17, so I don't know what he was like. But I guess I was just so struck by that, and I was fascinated in the book to try to understand how somebody can arrive at that young age already so competitively complete.
Yeah.
And my conclusion was that I think Tony Nadal is no amazing technician. He was not a great teacher of strokes necessarily, but I think he was in some ways the perfect fit and a bit of a genius when it came to the performance psychology and how he created Rafa's mentality and encouraged it. And the thing that I was struck by as I talked to everybody again after having covered it was Tony he did not sugarcoat anything. I mean, he had fun with Rafa when he was young. They did a lot of, things you do with a young child. He had fun things he created, and he pretended he was a great soccer player and fooled his young nephew for a while with that, and had all this games going, which was great. But I think on the court when they were playing, it was always very serious business in a way. He didn't treat it as a kid fun thing, and he was really preparing Rafa from the earliest age that tennis was going to present a series of challenges, call it adversity if you will, but it's still big challenges, tough stuff. You should expect it, and not only expect it, but you should embrace it. Now, I'm sure many coaches, as they go along with a player, they get them a little bit later in their lives, they make that message clear and they pass it on. But Rafa heard that and felt that from the earliest age. So I don't think he ever had a chance to really question that aspect of it. And maybe that helps explain that point by point mentality that he had, and sort of the eagerness that he had to play these huge points and all through his career. I just think Tony never did it any other way. So I think that was the consistency that he had. And you had to have Rafa's character for it to work. A lot of kids would have rebelled or broken down. And the other thing I wanted to mention, this is interesting from a coaching perspective, is that I didn't know this until I did the book, was, Rafa, we watch him play. He's so deliberate, honestly, irritatingly so for a lot of people that watch Rafa. Get on with the serve. Let's get going. We want to watch the tennis. And the rule exists because of Rafa. But I think when you go back and look at the early videos and you talk to people who coached him with Tony, like Joffrey Porta in Mallorca, Rafa played at light speed. Rafa played at a high pace. He would grab the balls, 5-10 seconds, boom, 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 play the points. And there was concern at 12, 13 years old that he was playing too quickly and he would burn himself out. He was such an intense guy, has a high motor, that they wanted to slow him down. So they actually gave him routines and kind of imposed them from an early age to slow him down. Ultimately, it may have gone too far, but it's interesting to see how we always think of Rafa as this, sort of, not tick filled and routine filled. And he would say he doesn't have OCD, but certainly people talk about that and associate that with him. But it wasn't his natural state. His natural state is pretty turbocharged. So that was fascinating to me to see how a player can kind of go outside their comfort zone and become so great that way.
John, you do a lot of work on the mindset. Taylor Townsend, who had concussion, was out of the game for a while, and she wrote a really nice piece and was quoted at saying how valuable you were in all facets of the game. And I know you're really good with the mind. How impressed were you by Rafa Nadal and just his utter belief and tendencies just to keep on going regardless of the situation?
Words can't describe. I mean, that's why he's, among the greats. He is, if we were talking about Greek gods, he would be up there with Zeus and Mercury and Athena and the rest of them, right? So,
and Stephanos Tsitsipas.
Your words, not mine. But I think, the whole concept of forging the greatness from the inside and then working out is a concept that I've seen show up or manifest itself in other areas of sport. So track and field athletes, you can tell immediately who has it and who doesn't.
Yeah.
Ice hockey players, you can tell immediately who has it and who doesn't. Basketball, American football, European football, soccer, you can tell who has it and who doesn't. The drive, the determination, the focus, the internal flame that cannot be extinguished. Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi, who's the greatest? Well, that depends by what metric you are judging them. If you are talking about someone who's a savant and freakishly natural footballer, Messi, hands down, there's no one that's ever going to be close, right? But if you're talking about somebody who dedicated themselves to a process, to a system, who's the embodiment of discipline, and I'm not saying that Messi doesn't share these characteristics. Everyone at the top does. However, there is a big difference between the paths that the two traversed and how they got there. And Rafa is no different. Rafa's path, Federer's path, Djokovic's path, right? And I always say Djokovic was the youngest of the three children. And, chronologically independent. But if you look at it in a household, you have three children. What child typically is the smartest? What child typically is the quickest? What child typically is the wittiest? It's
youngest.
usually the youngest one, right? Because they've had the advantage to not only learn from the parents, but learn from their siblings. So they're surrounded by teachers. Their entire environment is teaching them. And I think that's where Djokovic had his biggest advantage, right, coming up in that time. And we could argue that there were other components in other periods in tennis history where that might have existed, but I don't think you had two dominant icons present at the same time, just battling back and forth, where you had such stellar examples of different and grandiose levels of accomplishment and ability.
Mark, do you think, talking about that then, that the likes of Iga Swiatek, Aryna Sabalenka, Alcaraz and Sinner on the men's side have that differentiation between them and, say, the rest of the fields?
Well, I think just going back to the points John alluded to, for me, Rafa is maybe still the only player I've ever seen that is able to play every single point with the same level of intensity. He plays every point as if it's match point, and I don't think that's it's not by accident. He's the only one. Roger didn't, even Novak doesn't, but Rafa, he's going to play every point as if his life depended on it. So that's a unique skill set. These top players we have now, I think they're all special. But there's just so many factors. We'd love to be able to, as coaches, put our finger exactly on what the secret formula is for Rafa. But if he'd been born in a different country, or maybe didn't have Tony around, or was playing right-handed, or grew up on indoor hard courts in England, everything would have or could have been different. There's so many variables.
You've been his coach.
Exactly. As soon as it all came, it's just there's so many things that have to go into making the environment nurture the nature, really.
Yeah. Chris?
I was just going to say, one other thing that we shouldn't forget is that Rafa was raised, because of his family, in a culture of excellence. Not just obviously Tony and his uncle at coaching, but his other uncle. He had quite a few uncles and aunts, but Miguel Angel Nadal was one of the best soccer players in the world. And Rafa grew up watching his uncle playing for Mallorca, playing for Barcelona, playing for the Spanish national team. So the family had already great expertise. Tony had actually coached Miguel Angel in tennis when Miguel Angel was young. He was one of the best players in Mallorca. And so when Rafa came along, he was the first of the grandchildren to arrive, and he was already entering this pretty experienced family. They understood how to nurture excellence. They had seen some of the pitfalls with Miguel Angel. And even though Rafa didn't end up becoming a soccer player, I think it definitely applied to him. And I think he also knew that was sort of the family standard. His father, Sebastian, was also a very successful businessman locally. And so there was that culture within the family, I think, that also encouraged a lot of that. But I think whatever it was that allowed Rafa to resist and absorb Tony's teachings and not break down and not rebel should not be underestimated. I mean, we always put everything on the coaching and the method, but I think ultimately that his internal character just had to be a certain way for it to work.
Mark, I'm interested in hearing from you on this one, because Magda, of course, is a former Australian Open semi-finalist in singles. And then we'll speak to John, whose player Taylor Townsend is now a double major champion in doubles. What does it take to get to a major final and then win it? You've obviously got to win 7 matches, but it's not just that easy, is it?
You probably need to ask someone that's done it, because I haven't been. I've been a couple of steps away with a player, but I think, I'll be interested to hear what John says. I think there's a lot of different parts that go into it. You need some luck. The draw has to go the way that you need it to go that week, and that's what I find incredible. I think the thing for me that I find incredible about all of those guys, Rafa, Roger, Novak, was not necessarily the amount of tournaments that they won, which is obviously outstanding on its own merit. But I think there was a stat of how many quarterfinals of Grand Slams Roger made consecutively. Yeah. That was a stat, and I wish I knew that number right off the top of my head. Now I should do, but it was a ridiculous amount, and that you know, it's almost that just expectation every week or every tournament that, you know, this is going to be the minimum, you know, the minimum I'm expecting of myself. It was really incredible.
The answer is 58
John, you go,
major
please. I'd
quarterfinals.
like to hear your idea.
That's incredible. 58 quarterfinal appearances.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
23 semifinals in a row.
It was consecutive as well, wasn't it? A lot of those, it was consecutive.
23
quarterfinals,
consecutive
yeah.
semifinals
Yeah.
in a row as well.
Yeah.
So-
yeah, that's some concentration.
So what that tells me, and this is kind of, I'm going to encircle my answer with this, but what that tells me is that these guys and girls, because I think probably we could look at Serena or Graf or, you know, some of the other players on the women's side, but they have a system. Oh, I'm obviously forgetting Sabalenka and Iga, right? But they have a system. And what it tells me is that they have adopted the system and it's become autonomous. It's become a program that is consistently running in the background, so they don't need to create or search for it. It becomes very methodical as to how they prepare for the upcoming opponent, but they don't have to worry about the base level of performance that they already know is going to be present, because they already put the mechanisms in place for that to automatically appear. And that's not to belittle the work that goes in, quite the opposite. It's to applaud it, because in order for anything to become automatic that's desirable, it has to be trained intensively and repetitiously, intentionally. And all of the players that we are talking about, I haven't seen too much of Sabalenka's behind the scenes. I've seen, you know, some of the work that's been done with Iga, but I know the work has been done. It's obvious, right? So when we see these performances, and especially, I'm always looking for consistency. I'm not looking for the one-hit wonder. I have zero interest in that, because it's cute for pomp and circumstance, but it doesn't lead for longevity, and you're never going to be in the record books with any modicum of respect by your other fellow record holders if you're a one and done. That's just the way it is. And maybe it's because I'm American and we tend to forget.
You're successful.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So I think the consistency and continuity of their careers speaks volumes for the work that was done continuously behind the scenes in preparing their process and putting systems in place.
Yeah. Chris, I wonder, from all the times you've watched live tennis, you said you watched all of Rafa's major titles at Roland Garros, how much the game has changed now and how much you see it perhaps changing in the future. It just seems to have got so physical.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Gil Gross, young journalist, has done some good work on this lately, looking at the numbers. I don't know how much, Mark and John have crunched them. Looks like on the men's side, the rally lengths haven't changed that much. There's basically the length of play itself hasn't changed that much, but the pace of shot has changed quite a bit in the last few years. It's increased on all the shots pretty much. So that has to take a toll on your body to have to be able to create that pace and react to that pace. And also you have to be able to have the quickness and speed and reaction to be able to adjust to it and stay in there and have the shot tolerance. But I came up, my first years covering the game were the late 80s. So I arrived with the arrival of Agassi, Sampras, Courier, and Chang, and the end of Edberg and Becker and those players, and a little bit of Lendl. So I've obviously, from that point of view, I think what strikes me is just those guys were all very dangerous. And if you go back and watch like Sampras Edberg match or an Agassi Edberg match, it still looks pretty topical to me, at least anyway, compared to it. The difference, however, is that those guys had strengths and maybe one big weapon or maybe two, an area where they could really hurt you. But now the players today, and the big three is a great exemplar of that. It can hurt you from everywhere, and they're also able to generate pace and dangerous shots from just about anywhere on the court. Obviously, the serve and volley from that period of time has faded away, but I wouldn't say attacking tennis has faded away at all. The +1 game in some ways is just a variation of that, and I think it's just the ability of these players to patrol that baseline, retrieve an attack out of the corners the way they can off most every shot. And I think that applies to the women's game the same, maybe not the same degree, but also I think that's been a big change that I've seen.
That's a nice transition, Mark. You are the coach of Magda Linette, world number 33. She is 33, so it's easy to remember. She's just been playing Strasbourg, reached the quarterfinals, lost to the eventual champion Elena Rybakina. I was very impressed with Magda's play. I don't know how you felt overall, but I'd love to know how Magda's game has progressed, particularly on the clay, and also what you think that she can still do in perhaps a few years that's left in her career.
Yeah, she's playing better. I think, this year we made the addition of having Agnieszka Radwanska helping us. And she's been a great addition to the team. I think giving Magda that belief. A lot of it is, at the top level of the game, everyone can play well. So it's just trying to find a small advantage. And so much of it is down to self-belief, confidence, which I think she's really embraced that this year. And certainly, I think on the clay, Agnieszka's been really an asset in sort of just me. I think and John would probably agree that a lot of the tennis is at this level everyone can play. It's just about having a little bit more trust in your strengths and knowing your own identity on the court. I think that's really important, and I think that's something that we've been able to improve a little bit this year. And like you said, hopefully we can keep squeezing a little bit more out of the last couple of years of her career because I think it's she's getting better like a wine, I think, in terms of the way she's playing. So hopefully we'll continue on the clay for a couple more matches before we get onto the grass. But yeah, it's been an encouraging last few months for us. So hopefully we can keep the ball rolling.
And John, Taylor Townsend was 1 out of qualifying your player. Did go to qualifying, won 2 matches, lost in the third round to Daria Saville, who we've actually had on the podcast, along with her husband and now Coach Luke. Got pipped at the post, but has got in as a lucky loser. Will play Elisabetta Cocciaretto in the first round of the main draw. Firstly, how is Taylor doing? Because we know she didn't play Madrid or Rome because of the concussions she suffered. So how is she physically, and what are you expecting from Taylor, having not played a huge amount recently?
I'm really happy with the fact that she is back playing. That's first and foremost. We missed 3 events, actually. Charleston just after Miami, and then, excuse me, Madrid and Rome. So making sure that, we took the time necessary and required to make sure that she came back at 100% was first and foremost. I was pretty adamant about that. Tennis is going to be but a short period in your life, but hopefully you will long outlive that, and we want to make sure that we're not doing anything to jeopardize that quality after the sport. So that was first and foremost. She's back. We worked really hard. She had a couple of ups and downs, particularly in the beginning right after Miami, but we had a great team behind us and supporting us, and we spent a lot. I mean, I didn't get much sleep because of my 5-hour difference. So, there were several nights we're talking at 2 a.m. and I'm, writing programs and things like that. So it was, but, I love that kind of stuff because she was committed to doing everything she needed to do to get back. And I'm matching your energy kind of guy. So I think it was fine. I think she played exceptional, in her third round match. I'm not saying perfect. I'm not using those 2 terms synonymously, right? Yeah. There's always room for improvement. There are always things that you could be better. But for somebody that hasn't played in, basically a month, maybe a bit more than that, competitively, I think she played actually better than she did in Miami in singles, to be honest. And the reason for that is as Mark illustrated, her confidence level, understanding her game, and understanding that the mind will play tricks on you, and you have to become really adept at ignoring those tricks and just double down when that doubt starts to creep in, rather than abandoning and searching for something new. So I think going into this next match, she's going to go in with a bit more confidence than she had, but more importantly, a ton more clarity.
And you are the clarity coach.
On some
it
days.
Worked out. It just, yeah, exactly. According to your wife, but that's for another story. Chris, I just wondered from you about qualifying, because it seems like qualifying for a major is unbelievably tough. So much hunger for everybody involved, because of course there's huge prize money, isn't there, and big points to be won.
I love.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, I love that. I love that it's highly competitive. I love that basically you're thrown into a dogfight straight away, because in my opinion, if you show up to an event like this, you should be prepared, right? Yeah. You should be prepared and willing, wanting to win, wanting to beat everyone that's on the other side of the net from you. And if that level of dedication and hunger and desire is not there, then should you be here? We should be home.
Yeah.
So. And I could say from a journalist or spectator's perspective, I'm just happy to see these Grand Slam qualifying tournaments become so much more of an occasion. And I think that's one of the I'm not sure I love the fact that the slams have become 3-week events. It's tough in a way, but I think it's great that the players playing qualifying are getting these crowds. I mean, I've been out on the outside courts of Roland Garros this week, and it feels like the French Open used to feel main draw 10-15 years ago. It's they got 100,000 people came out this week to watch, and they're there for the atmosphere, but they're there to watch the qualifying, and they're going to learn about these players. And their support is big. I've been on court 14 for matches. It feels like you're in the middle of the main tournament, and that's got to be so encouraging for these players who are wonderful players. People ranked from 90 to 200 in the world are.
I think we
just lost you, Chris. Mark, we'll go on while we've lost Chris for a minute. I would imagine that Magda's probably not hugely pleased by getting Clara Towson in the first round, but sometimes a qualifier or a lucky loser is actually more dangerous because, of course, they've been there for a while. They are very in match shape.
Yeah, I don't think we don't have any fear of playing Clara. We know she's a great player. There's no easy matches. You're playing somebody from qualies. You're playing a lucky loser. You're playing a wild card. Everyone can play. And there's a different kind of pressure associated playing each one, right? If you're playing Iga on center court first round, that's a certain pressure. If you're playing a qualifier or a wild card, that's a different pressure. So, no, I think, if you look at our history, I would say that we tended to do a little bit better when the draw was a little bit tougher, actually. This was the pressure that we tended to deal with best, I think, whereas maybe in the past where we were in the smaller tournaments and we had a seeding of 1 or 2, that's maybe a pressure we weren't so comfortable with because it hasn't been normal for us. And I think that's also, there's a lot of, you can dig deep in that and maybe overanalyze, but I think players like Iga, for example, she's been number 1 at everything she did since she was a kid. She was number 1 in many different things growing up. So she's used to that, dealing with that kind of pressure, whereas some players like Magda really, were kind of somewhat, I don't want to say irrelevant, but in the juniors were not, substantial force in the big tournaments. So, it's a different pressure, and she'll be hopefully ready to go on Monday.
And what about you, John? Would you prefer, Taylor's obviously coming in as a lucky loser, would you like a seed? Is the draw something you discuss, or is it just about round 1? It doesn't matter who you're playing. Let's concentrate on us.
Yeah. I mean, I always had that philosophy. It doesn't matter who's on the other side of the net. It's their job to beat you and take you out of your game. And if you're going to win, then you have to do the same thing to them. So it doesn't matter. And whoever shows up with all their tools and is able to use them on that day for the entire length of the match, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're typically going to come away raising their hand. They're going to be the last one to shake the chair's hand at the end, right? So we go into everyone like that. I don't. That's why, you know, people laugh at me all the time. Like, do you know who she's playing next? No, I have no idea. I don't need to know until the night before when I'm doing tactical analysis and we put together a game plan. But I don't need to know a week out who she could potentially meet in whatever X round. It's irrelevant because you have to take, just like walking. Can you walk taking 3 steps at a time? No, you have to take 1 step at a time.
I can.
Right?
I can. Depends how much wine I've had.
You float, Candy. That's different.
Like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Right. So
I do other things, but we won't go into that. It's very, very relevant. We were talking on another podcast, actually, Chris, the other day with Dan Kiernan on his podcast, and talking about whether strategy was an important part of the game or if that's sort of gone out of the window and it's just about moving well, hitting hard. And I wondered, Chris, your thoughts on that.
Well, I think you should be asking the coaches who are in the X's and O's and seeing what's being said and before the match and then being executed. I think they're better judges than I am. But to me, from the outside, obviously there's a lot of communication going on very openly now between coaches and players.
Yes.
Very differently. That was always going on to some degree since I've been covering tennis for 35 years. But now it's very out there in the open. Huge more impact from analytics that have taken over and available to everybody now in a way.
I'd argue that the analytics and the statistics is well, sorry, let me restart. I would say that the strategical part now is more important than ever because the playing field has become so level that finding a marginal gain in whatever area you can and having so much more technology, whether it's in statistics, videos, dartfish, things like this, it's become even more prevalent and it's actually more important than it was before.
Interesting. Yeah, go for it, Chris.
I was just going to say, from talking to Rafa and Roger over the years about this, they kind of went through the transition. They both ended up with analytics in there, especially Roger, probably earlier than people realize. But and they did say that the speed of the game made them feel that there was more reaction now than necessarily high-level tactical thinking going on, maybe compared to their early parts of their careers. That might have just been a feeling that they had on the court. I know Roger felt that way at times, where everything was speeding up. So it was react, and the patterns you'd established were very important. But I mean, obviously, between points, you're talking about serving locations, you're talking about where you're lining up to return, you're talking about tendencies. That has to be as Mark said, a much more important part of the game now because it's now quantified in a way it wasn't before.
And John, your thoughts?
To both of their points, I think tactically it has become significantly more important because of the speed and pace of the game, the ability for the ease and the ability for players to generate power through the use of technology and evolution of the equipment in the sport. I think it has moved to more of a reactive type environment, and therefore having preset plans already in place that you can go to become really, really important, because in those microseconds between recognition and movement, the initiation of movement, you don't really have a whole lot of time to think about much else. Arguably, you don't have time to think at all. It's all automatic. So if you don't have those programs already laid, those tracks firmly in place, then it's going to be very difficult for you. And it's pretty obvious to me when players are struggling in those moments, when you can see that they can't see the map anymore and they're lost in space, disoriented, while they're playing the game.
Panic has set in. You see that as a commentator, and I mentioned this to Mark a lot, that you can see it so quickly in players' eyes when they start to panic, and they're almost looking desperately at their coaching boxes. And I'm not sure, Mark, if that's a good thing for the players to show sort of a little bit of weakness.
Well, just to jump on the last point now, I think I agree. I think that now the players have got to be, there's a level of automation, but also now a skill set that probably didn't exist 20, 30 years ago was adaptability, because players typically were playing a one-dimensional game. If you were Stefan Edberg, you served and volleyed, and that was what you did. And if you were Michael Chang, you ran side to side all day, and that was what you did. Now you see Daniil Medvedev sometimes 20 feet behind the baseline returning serve. Sometimes he steps in 3 feet and takes a swing at a second serve, right? So players are having to be far more adaptable now to what their opponents are doing than whereas before it was a little bit more of a stubborn mindset. No, this is what I do. And even if I'm losing a lot of points doing this, I'm going to keep doing it. So I think that, like John said, a big part is the automation and being able to do things automatically, but also being adaptable is a really important skill set now that's needed for players at this level. Regarding players looking at coaches, I think it's personal to the player and to the coach. I think some like it, some don't. It can be good and it can be bad. It's very dependent on the individual.
There's something, Chris, that's changed massively, though, isn't it? Obviously, it's legal now, where it was going on before, but it was illegal. Are you a fan of all the chat between the players and the coaches?
You know, I think I'm a mixed bag when it comes to tradition and innovation. I'm not sure that the general public appreciated the mano a mano aspect of tennis that I always felt I felt that was important. As somebody, I was a college player. I was Division III level, which is not, really a true college player, but I played all my life, and I struggled with clear thinking under pressure, under duress. And I had a lot of admiration for the players that I covered through my career who were able, someone like Nadal, for example, who was able to think clearly under pressure and to execute things and to see patterns and recognize them. Maybe Tony was tipping him off with brushing across the nose. I don't know exactly what was going on, but we'll never know all the details. I know they did some of that, but there was certainly a lot of presence of mind. And I do wonder whether the players who are raised in this environment where there's constant coaching going on throughout their whole careers, somebody pointed out, somebody like Ben Shelton's never really played a match without being coached with the college stuff and then coming on the pro tour. I don't know how that affects your overall development, and it'll be interesting to see how that does, because it's not. I don't think it's going away. Personally, I don't, as an outsider, I don't know what it really adds to the equation. As a spectator, I guess there's a little bit of fun to sort of see what they say and hear it. Sometimes you don't get to really hear it very clearly, but I feel like it's a fundamental change. I'd be curious what the coaches think, if they agree.
We did actually something interesting at the Next Gen in Saudi Arabia at the end of last year. We actually spoke to the coaches during the match, which was fascinating. I love that part. So I got to speak with Lerner Tien's coach and João Fonseca's and Jakob Mensik's coach to hear about the game plan before the match and then what was happening during the match. So I think that was really nice. And as a commentator, I really like to hear the coaches talking to the players if they say something interesting. John, your thoughts, because when Taylor plays doubles in particular, when I've watched, she just keeps her eye on the court. She's talking with Katja, her doubles player partner, but she's not really engaging massively with you, just maybe a little encouragement here and there.
Yes. My philosophy on that is you already have all the solutions to whatever problem that could arise on the court. And if there's, for some reason, you can't access that, give a glance over. I'm happy to remind you, and then you take it and run. But beyond that, there's really not much that we should be doing at that point other than encouraging and keeping a watchful eye for something maybe that they're not addressing, something that we see very clearly, but they're not picking up on. That we could maybe tip them off to or make them aware of so that they can then impose the solution that they have or pull that tool out of their tool bag that they can use in the moment. But I think, it's ridiculous in every other high level sport where there's a significant amount of pressure to perform that there is no coaching. You have it in boxing, you have it in MMA, you have it in, every team sport. You have it in golf. I mean, the the difference in performance level between a top player who's playing around by his or herself and one that's got their caddy to rely on, even the change of caddies, right? If you bring a new one in or you have to substitute at the last minute, there's a performance dip there. it's significant when you have a circle of influence that you trust, and it's providing you with valuable, useful information, because they understand how you learn, they understand how you process information. All of these things become critically important. And I think to have something, that exists on a world stage, on a sporting level like tennis, and not have access to that information, I think is doing a disservice to the spectators and also to the players, because it adds another layer of avoidable, I would argue, unnecessary pressure. You still have to implement, right? So I could give you all the information in the world. You still have to go out there and execute. That doesn't change the mano a mano that Chris was referring to earlier.
Yeah.
The only difference is there's a layer of stress that is not directly necessary in the game, but is inconveniently associated with it, that could be somewhat lessened by the inclusion or reliance or involvement of a coach.
Mark, anything to add on that?
100%. No, 100%. I'm a big advocate of coaching and helping the player to perform. I think we talked about this a few times on this podcast, and yeah, I agree. I think that why would we isolate tennis players when all the other sports have embraced the opportunity to help the athlete to perform better? I think there's no logical argument against it. If you don't like it as the individual player, if an individual player doesn't like it, they don't have to use it. That's fine. Making it available, I think, will be a benefit to everyone.
Chris Clarey has just left. If you're tuning in on YouTube, we are Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach going live with a Roland Garros preview. Of course, the second major of the year beginning this Sunday. I'm joined at the moment by Mark Gellard, coach of Magda Linette, and also John Williams, coach of Taylor Townsend. Let's now spin it forward to Roland Garros. What can we expect, gentlemen? I'd love to know what's different on site, if anything, this year. How are the courts playing? How are the facilities? Mark, if you don't mind going first.
John, I'm gonna let me pass this one to John first, because you've been here for a week. I've only been here a day, so I haven't seen too much yet. We got in the night before last, so today was sort of our first day on the site.
Nice. Yeah, so the first thing I would say is they made some significant improvements to the infrastructure a little bit, which is nice. They have kind of perform. I think Roland Garros is fairly consistent when it comes to the way that they operate, and they have added, like I said, a bit of an improvement in the infrastructure, and on the player services side, things seem to be operating a bit more smoothly. Of course, for qualifying, there's a general malaise and casualness to the operations. But first round matches not even getting announced, or there are no match calls. You get no escort to the court. You get no escort from the court.
Good luck.
And then second round they start announcing, and still no escort, but you at least know when the match is being called. Yeah. But we laugh about those things, because for me it's all part of the process. You don't, whatever. So I think this year is consistent with some improvements in some of the ways that we're able to interact and move around as players and coaches, which is very cool. As far as court playability, courts seem to play the same. I was here in 15, I was here in 23, and I'm here now. It seems to play the same. I haven't noticed any significant difference in the way that the courts are playing then versus now. There maybe they're playing a touch slower, but the weather also has, it's clay, so humidity changes things.
Yes. Chris, we've just been speaking about improvements at Roland Garros. I know you have a place in Paris. I don't know if you're there in your home right now, but you are very familiar with the site. It's unique, isn't it, Roland Garros? Because when you've been there, it's very small. We've just had an announcement from the US Open. They're going to put, I think, 800 million into improvements up till about 2027. So it's just going to be unbelievable. I actually play quite a lot at the All England Club. They're doing huge renovations as we speak. So there's going to be a lot new for the championships this year. But what about Roland Garros? Chris, we can't hear you. I don't know if the guys can hear you.
Looks like he's muted.
Let's see if I can unmute.
Okay.
Mark, if you're happy to chat while we sort this out.
Yeah. Then going to John's point, I think over the years the Australian Open has kind of been the gold standard in terms of player services and things of that nature. I have already made a point to talk to the French Open today, actually, because I think obviously they're always trying to make improvements, but I think there's and it's a great facility. We're talking about first world problems here, right? But I think there's some things that can still be made much more player friendly. I don't think that I think they're the second worst or the worst in prize money for all the Grand Slams here at Roland Garros. So there's a lot of areas that need to be improved, I think. And also I know that there's a lot of unrest from some of the players on tour, knowing that, recently they added the Sunday start, which is an extra day of work technically for the players, which is not being shown in prize money or per diem for hotels and things of this nature. So there's always those areas I think that can be improved. But that's big picture. That's not a small thing that needs to be looked at, on a big scale. But yeah, I think all the slams are getting better, and I think actually I do think US Open is the one that was probably lagging behind the most, actually, because Wimbledon's made their plans clear, buying the golf club across the street, how they're going to expand. Australia, as I said, is always setting the standards in terms of innovation, and actually having Jean Bouin, which is the off-site practice facility here, is a nice facility. There's plenty of courts, a good-sized gym, so that's been really a big addition over the last few years. But I think US Open is definitely in need of an overhaul in terms of their facilities. So I'm looking forward to see what they do over the next few years. In fact, I was talking to Janina Wickmeyer the other day while we were waiting for food in Madrid, because Madrid is probably one of the best places in the world for food on tour at the site. It's fantastic. And we were saying we wish she had in New York, and she said to me, I played qualies in New York about 20 years ago, and the restaurant still had the same chairs and layout as it does today. So I think that was a pretty good assessment of how they haven't updated things there as they need to do, and so it'll be nice to see some improvements on that site as well.
Chris, I think we've sorted out the problem. It was my fault I hadn't unmuted you, but yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts on Roland Garros as a whole, the food, what's changed over the years. Still no sound. Still, we cannot hear you. I wonder, Chris, if you can go to your settings button and just see if there's a solution to that. Yeah, I can't hear you, unfortunately. John, do you base your favourite tournaments like Mark does on the food quality?
Mark nailed it. I think I was just having this conversation with someone yesterday, as a matter of fact, and by far, Madrid is the best food on tour, bar none. Which surprised me, actually, because I expected Rome to be up there, right?
Yes.
But it is not. And in terms of tournament as a whole, facilities, access, transportation, again, I'll have to agree with Mark. The AO.
Don't agree with him too much. It's going to give him a big head.
No, when he's right, he's right. So the AO by far is, I think pretty significantly far ahead. I honestly don't know what Wimbledon can do, what the US Open can do, and what, the French can do to bridge that gap, because in Wimbledon, for example, are you going to remove the traffic from London? So if that's not going to happen, then you have a significant encumbrance.
Yeah.
Are you going to buy up, several hundred homes surrounding the club? I don't
No.
know.
Can you afford to?
Right. So transportation and logistics is the major issue there, in my opinion. New York, you could argue the same, because you're staying in Manhattan, you have to go through the tunnel or over a bridge to get to Queens. Logistically, that takes time, and that time adds length to your day, either on the front end or the back end, and realistically both. So things like that matter a lot. Whereas in Australia, you're 15 minutes from the site. Basically, no matter, like, if you choose to go stay in, Sydney, that's your prerogative.
It's about the same from Manhattan to Flushing Meadows, isn't it?
Right, exactly. So I think, from a total perspective, it's almost like the city and the tournament was laid, the city and the logistics were laid out with the tournament in mind. That became the nucleus, and then it was like, how can we build this other stuff around it to support it?
Yeah. Chris, any luck? Can we hear you now?
Last try. Can you hear me?
Yes.
No?
Bingo.
You can.
Gotcha. All right. Go on then. The stage is yours.
I'm glad the ones who should have been talking were talking all this time. That's good. Sorry for that. No, I would just say a few things. One is, I came to Roland Garros first time in 1991. And obviously the footprint was probably half of what it is now. It's always been a narrow place. I think the big debate they had 10 years ago was whether they should stay and try to, lean into the Paris boutique approach to it, or take it someplace like they did in Australia, going from Kooyong to Melbourne Park.
Yep.
And in the US, going from Forest Hills to, the new stadium. So it was a big decision. I think it was a bit of they kind of put it out there as a way to get what they wanted, which was to stay, but they are limited. I mean, there is that big Bois de Boulogne just across the road. And believe it or not, they did at one point have the right to build in there. When they were going to bid the Olympics against London for 2012 games, they had got preliminary permission to build another stadium in the Bois de Boulogne, which is pretty unthinkable if you're living in Paris as long as I am. But they've never been able to get that permission again. And I think I wouldn't entirely rule that out down the road 20, 30 years from now. But for now, they've gone as far as they can go in any direction. And I still feel like it's a train platform, at rush hour a lot of the time when you're trying to get around.
You've got to be very skinny when you go to the stadiums.
And the other thing that's weird for me is when I came in 91, I mean, it was in the same site, but hardly anything's left from that initial time. It's all changed. They've rebuilt almost everything. So it's a different vibe, a different place. They try to do a lot with it, but I feel like whenever they make a promise that we're going to add some space to get more breathing room, the breathing room never lasts very long. The facilities have improved and everything else. But I personally am glad. I don't know how John and Mark feel about it, but I'm personally glad that they were able to keep it in, more or less Paris. I think that's part of the mystique and being able to have that be within the zone of Paris proper. And I feel like that history as a journalist is important to sort of know that you're playing in the same space as the Musketeers played in, or the same space that Bill Tilden played in, and those sorts. I think that matters to me, and I do think a little bit of that has been lost from a historical thread perspective in Australia and in the US. But I'm not sure the average fan thinks about that very much.
I personally think it would have been a bit soulless to move. I'm glad they stayed. Let's talk about 2025 Roland Garros then. Who are our runners and riders? Mark, let's start with you on this one. On the men's and women's side, anybody that you think is not going to be seeded this year but could make a deep run? And we know, obviously, Caroline Garcia's last Roland Garros, so it'd be great if you could speak about her and her work on the sport.
I mean, to go to the starting point, you asked for an unseeded player that could make a run. Was that
somebody? Yeah, somebody who's going to be either lowly seeded or not seeded, who you think could make a run. We've just seen Maya Joint, the young Australian, win in Rabat. We've seen Elena Rybakina win in Strasbourg. Fabio Caboli won in Hamburg today. And Novak Djokovic, of course, winning his 100th title. But yeah, if there's any names that you think this person's playing pretty well right now, with the exception, of course, of Magda, who we know is playing very well.
Yeah, I mean, you have to probably look at players like Ons Jabeur. She's going to be unseeded, which is probably the first time here she's unseeded, but she's always a threat, right? She knows how to win at this level. She's been to the finals of slams before. And even with checking, I don't know if she'd be seeded actually, and you have to check. I don't think she would. Danielle Collins is obviously playing some good tennis right now. I don't know if she's seeded or not.
I
think
think
she
she's
is
know that.
seeded. Yeah.
She's seeded high. Okay, so yeah, and then probably the last one that I know isn't seeded, so I would say would be Emma Raducanu. I think she's always a threat. Whether clay's her surface, I think that a lot of the noise around her is. Do I agree with a lot of the things she says or does? No, but I think she's a hell of a tennis player. I think she's a fantastic player.
And slightly worried about injury, according to latest reports. So there's an injury in the Raducanu camp. Whether she'll be all right to play is another matter. But what a ball striker.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Maybe, John, do you have anyone that you, outside of those that you?
I think Naomi Osaka could be one to watch.
She's just won a clay court title at challenger level.
So is she seeded here? I didn't.
She's not.
No.
Yeah, I don't think she's seeded this year.
So I think she could be one to watch. She could be a bit of a dark horse of sorts. I mean, obviously we know she's got the ability to win a slam. She's done it, but
4 times.
In recent form, it's been kind of up and down, similar to Raducanu. So I think she could surprise a few if she's in good form and she catches the Parisian wave. It could be very interesting for her. Also, her draw is, I mean, she's gonna have a tough one with Paula Badosa, but Badosa's had some physical issues as well, as has Naomi. So if who's gonna show up, physically able to compete, and whether or not they're able to do that with any longevity, that could be interesting.
If Saka wins,
I forgot one, Candy. Sorry, that I should have mentioned. That I just thought of would be Maria Sakkari, who's ranked about 90 right now, but
that's crazy, isn't it?
Finals or semis here a couple of years ago.
Semis. She hasn't been to the final.
Okay, semis, and she knows her way around a clay court. We played her actually twice in the last 2 tournaments. So, and she's back reunited with her coach from before, Tom Hill. So, she'd definitely be one to watch out for as well, being a bit of a dark horse.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And Chris, your thoughts on the women's side? Then we'll spin round to the men's.
Yeah, Mark's right about Danielle. She's not seeded, so
okay.
Is something she's dropped off just because lost a lot of points from last year. So she's something
she won those back-to-back titles, didn't she?
And if you go kind of you go pretty low in the seedings. I mean, Peyton Stearns obviously is an interesting one, high 20s there. She's obviously seeded now, but just into that zone. What she did with those 3 back-to-back victories and breakers and third sets was amazing, and obviously has great sort of fighting mentality and some clay court game for sure, and big weapons. So, as a journalist, very curious to see how Peyton will do here, and we'll be watching that one closely.
Yeah, that's a good one. For me, the best US women on clay anyway, apart from Taylor Townsend, of course, Coco's got the best chance, hasn't she? And probably Peyton Stearns comes in as number 2. I think Pegula is struggling. She said, she lost in the opening round of Strasbourg just recently, and she posted on social media about her dog dying. Unfortunately, she's a huge dog lover, and I think that one really struck her hard. It was a bit of a surprise, and Navarro hasn't quite performed at the level she did in 2024. So for me, Peyton Stearns and Coco Gauff, probably the best US chances. Let's think about the men now, Mark. Anybody you see on the men's side that could cause a little bit of an upset? I was thinking Caboli, actually, the Italian who's just won Hamburg. But anybody apart from that?
The one that if I was a player or a coach of an ATP player that I just don't think I'd want in any tournament that's unseeded would be probably Riley Opelka. I just think clay is definitely not his favorite surface, but if he gets a hot streak and gets through a first couple of rounds, I think all of a sudden he's dangerous for anyone. And we were in the Yonex house today picking up some of Magda's new equipment, and there was a player in there that I know isn't seeded, but I thought one day maybe could do it, is someone like Joao Fonseca.
Oh, yes.
I think he's a really, really nice player. I think it's probably too early for him still, and he's not ready for that yet. But he's having a great year, and I think he would be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
John, any thoughts on the men's side, your dark horse or horses?
I don't know that I would label him a dark horse at this point, but I'm really excited to see Nishikori and Alcaraz. I think that could be a very interesting match. You know, it's
you're gonna have to wait a lot longer, John, because Nishikori is not playing.
Oh, really?
What do you know that we don't know, Mark?
No, it's already. I mean, if you check out the live rankings, he's already shown as withdrawn.
I see. That's why we brought Mark Gellard, who knows everything.
Yeah, Alcaraz is playing Zeppieri as qualifier.
And he is, of course, Alcaraz, the defending champion, did the Channel double, didn't he, last year, winning Roland Garros and Wimbledon. Chris, before we get to the favourites, because I'm sure he will be amongst them, your maybe surprise run on the men's side?
You know, I don't know. I mean, obviously Fonseca is interesting just because he had that good run in South America, and he's obviously got so much upside and so talented.
Yeah,
those
so many fans.
But there are a bunch of guys, that are in there that aren't seeded. I mean, I look at a guy like Cam Norrie or Bublik, or who's not a great clay quarter but dangerous player.
Yeah.
I feel like Lehechka has so much upside. He hasn't been able to play as well because of the injuries he's been through, but he's a dangerous player. Monfils is a floater for a round or two. Arnaldi, Caboli, those players for sure have proven themselves on the play. And then I guess those would be sort of the ones. I mean, you got a guy. I mean, again, a guy like Baez can play on clay, and he's not seeded. And it's just the men's game. There's so many possibilities for surprises and upsets on those early rounds because of those guys. The depth and the as Perez is not as busy. Feels like it's
just breaking up there, Chris. Just on the Argentinian men, Francisco Cerundolo has to be a favourite, hasn't he, to get into the second week, you'd imagine anyway. We're Roland Garros living here on Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach, Candy Reid, joined by Mark Gellard, John Williams, and the writer and journalist Christopher Clarey. Mark, let's now talk about the favourites on the women's side. Iga is, of course, the defending champion, the queen of clay, but still hasn't won a title in 2025. So is Aryna Sabalenka the big favourite to win the women's draw?
Yeah, I'd probably put Aryna down as a favorite, but it's so hard to say. I mean, how can you bet against Iga with her record here, right? If I was a betting man, I'd probably keep my money in my pocket and not go for one this year. But I think it's Aryna's a great player. She's definitely the player to beat right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, Coco's playing well, and back-to-back finals in Rome and Madrid. And then there's Iga, of course. So I'd probably have Sabalenka as my favorite, but would be very marginal.
All right. And John, if you had to put your money on your house on somebody, that little tiny maisonette you own in Tbilisi, what are you going to go for?
I would also keep my money in my pocket, but I think Paolini could be interesting this year.
Yeah.
Looking at, Maddie Keys' side of the draw, section of the draw, I mean, her ball could be very, very dangerous here if she's in form. And I think, having won a major this year, and hearing her talk about her journey to get there and managing herself there, I think she's a different player than she has been in previous years coming here. Regarding Iga, there's a tremendous amount of weight that she's going to have to lug around through 7 rounds. I think that's going to be tough. It's no short order for any player. I don't know. I instinctively, I would not bet on her. I would think that there's definitely going to be a dethroning this year, but amongst the other females, I mean, I'd love to see someone who's never won a major, happens to have the name Townsend, break through and disrupt.
Oh, that'd be good.
But
she's won 2 doubles majors, so don't get too greedy, John.
Yeah, no, I'm super greedy. I want her to win everything she earns.
Yes. Well, I'm just looking at the live rankings. So we've got Sabalenka 1, Coco Gauff 2, Pegula 3, Paolini 4, Swiatek 5, my pick, Mira Andreeva 6, Zhang Qinwen at number 7, Keys at 8, Navarro at 9, and Badosa at 10, with Rybakina just behind. Rybakina, of course, the Strasbourg winner today. Okay, Chris, so your turn. Let's put you on the spot.
Let's hope you guys can hear me. I like all those names you just mentioned, Candy. For me, Andreeva is very interesting. The one I've been curious about ever since I watched her play in college and did a couple stories on her is Dana Schneider.
Yes,
I feel she's got I don't know how the coaches feel about her, having faced her on tour. I just think she's got so much talent, and she loves the clay. I remember her talking about it with me when I interviewed her when she was 17 or so, and she pushed Paolini awfully hard in Rome. I mean, had her on the ropes. So I feel like she's in the ascendancy in a lot of ways, and this probably could be her best surface, I think, ultimately. So she could be a nice dark horse contender. And I think people haven't been talking much about Zheng Qinwen. She loves Roland Garros, obviously, won the gold medal there last year. Still, in some ways, a raw talent. So I just, I think we can't rule her out having a run as well.
Yeah, a raw talent who's got a real beef with Emma Navarro. She just said it again. How, and Emma Navarro did not respect her at last year's Olympics, and she didn't care what Navarro thought. And it seems like Navarro is one of the nicest people on tour. That's just my opinion. Mark, so let's go on to the ATP side now. Can anyone beat Alcaraz, and will it be an Alcaraz thinner final?
If I was putting money on this, I would probably pick Jannik to win it. I would that would be where I would go.
Do you think
I don't know what you would do, John. I just feel Jannik is. No, I feel that obviously Carlos is right there. It's not a big difference in terms of who I would choose, but I think Jannik's just a little less likely to stumble on one of the earlier hurdles. I think he's just a little bit more. He's a little bit more, I don't say boring because that's not the word, it would be a compliment, but a little bit more stable with the way he plays, and he's going to be a little bit more Rafa-like in taking care of business early on, whereas I can see Alcaraz maybe, just a few of those early rounds, he may lose a set or two, which could come back to hurt him further down the road. So if I was going to pick somebody, I'd probably pick Jannik to win this one.
And John, just before we speak, Matthew D'Souza is watching us on YouTube Live, and he says thinner is my pick to win the Grand Slam or major this year. Do you agree with Matthew, John?
I'd have to agree with Mark. I think that, Carlos, for all of his blossoming greatness, I think that the one thing that still eludes him is that ability to 100% lock in and stay consistent, from start to finish. I think the flashes of brilliance are very, very bright, but I think Jannik is able to just operate like a journeyman and perform at a very high level for an extended period of time. And I think that's going to potentially serve him well, provided he stays healthy.
Yeah. And the fact that he just locked in and got to the final after 3 months out, and the fact that he was going through all that stuff last year and won 2 major titles just means that he's a bit of a machine, isn't he? Jannik Sinner, he just doesn't seem to be bothered by things, which I find quite incredible. Chris, do you agree? Are you going with the guys with Sinner, or would you put your money somewhere else?
I'm not. No, I feel like Alcaraz has done the work, and even though he's fragile physically at times, I feel like the guy won. Let's face it, Monte Carlo and Rome. That
Yeah.
makes you the favorite for a reason, I think. And I feel like he's just proven himself. I agree with Mark that he is vulnerable to some ups and downs and early round hiccups for sure. And he's got Marozsan maybe in the second round, who's beaten him before on clay, so that could be an
Yes.
interesting one psychologically. And then he's got Tsitsipas in his area as well. But he's a great big match player, and I do think those guys have managed to kind of bring that home in the last month again. And sort of he had that issue with his leg, and he kind of bounced back from that. Maybe I think missing Madrid will ultimately help him be fresher in Paris in some ways. So I'd pick Alcaraz, and I think he's 11-2 in Masters 1000s or Grand Slam finals. And he's got a winning edge against Sinner. And I think for me, he's a little bit better clay court player if he plays very, very well and Sinner plays very, very well. I think Sinner has the advantage on hard courts. But, I'm going to go with Carlos.
All right. So we've got Sinner and Carlos. I would love it to be a final. I don't believe they've met in a major final yet. So perhaps Roland Garros will be the first. But we're missing out one big name, aren't we? We've spoken a little bit about Iga on the women's side. What about Novak on the men's side? He's just won Geneva, his 100th title. I, for one, actually think he should have ended his career at the Olympics last year when he won. I just thought that would have been the absolute perfect ending for the best who ever lived on the ATP side. I'd love to know your thoughts, though, on if he can win major number 25. Mark?
Can he win it? Absolutely. Will he? I don't know. It's a tough one for him to do, but he absolutely can. I think that if there's anyone that doubts that he can, then they don't know about tennis, because this guy is the greatest of all time statistically. He's shown over and over that he can bounce back and surprise you. Everyone had him written off a year ago before the Olympics, when he was starting to struggle a little bit with injuries and things, and he's just proven everyone wrong. So I personally would love to see him win it, but I don't. I think I would like to think that his best chance to win another slam will probably be Wimbledon or Australia.
Okay, he is 38 now, Mark. He's 5 years older than Magdalene, your player, and you think he can go seven matches possibly?
I mean, I wouldn't say that there's a difference between now and 1 year ago, really, when he made the Wimbledon final and won Australia. I mean, that was 12 months ago, less than that. So, yeah, there's no problem for him to go 7 matches still, especially if he takes care of business early on. But I think it's a tall task for him now. I think as you get older, the physical part is the problem, but it's for me more a little bit the mental, the struggle, the push, the ability to sort of challenge yourself. And he just started to look a little bit tired to me when I watched him playing recently. But what do I know? I don't watch him enough, and this guy's a legend.
He's got the desire, perhaps. John, you are a fitness guru. I think you're probably the fittest out of the four. Maybe Mark would disagree. I don't think, Chris, you and I wouldn't disagree with that, would we? But perhaps you can give us your thoughts on a 38-year-old going 7 rounds at Roland Garros.
I mean, I would never bet against Novak if he's 100% committed. I think I think that's a scary dude to see, on the other side of the net if he's 100% committed. To Mark's point, at this point, it's the same argument that I had, with Jordan and even Tiger Woods as they, got later in their career. Are you able to find that motivation to push yourself harder and harder? Because as you get older, physically, the things that used to just be hard work now are really hard work. They're harder. So can you push yourself that extra little bit? And can you do that for 7 matches? Because it's the whole thing, right? It's not just the on court. It's the before, the during, the after, the preparation, like the whole process. So he's been doing this a really long time, and it gets old. And when you've had as much success as he's had, I don't know what else he feels like he needs to prove, what the main motivators are for him. And that could be the deciding factor. I've seen him a couple of times in recent matches where I looked at him and kind of looked at his facial expression, and I looked at his body language, and I was like, it looks like he's questioning, do I really want to keep doing this? Like, what have I got to prove? That kind of thing. So I don't know. He's playing Mackie McDonald unless that's changed.
Yeah, no, that is still correct. Unless Mark knows something that we don't know. It's a pretty good draw, isn't it? It's Mackie McDonald to play either Mute or qualified Tabur, and then Denis Shapovalov is seeded to meet Novak in the third round. But it looks like it'd probably be Pedro Martinez. If I had to guess, it would be Martinez rather than Shapo in the third rounds for Novak. So I think he'd take that draw.
Yeah, I mean, I think
the only question I have actually.
I'm sorry, Mark.
Sorry, John. Go ahead. Sorry. No, you go, please.
I was just going to say, I think if Mackie is playing well, that could be a physical test for Novak that he doesn't really need in a first round match.
Right, and that's what Matthew was our listener that is enjoying writing in. Thanks, Matthew, for this. He says, in one of a match against Carlos, I would still give Novak a chance. However, 3 hours today and then 6 matches to the final, that's very tough. And that's going to be the key for Novak, isn't it? He doesn't need long 5-sitters right at the beginning of this tournament. He wants 3-setters and get off the court as quickly as possible, Chris.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul Annacone said it many times. You can never rule out greatness, and Novak is the definition of greatness in tennis. So it's not impossible, as Mark said. And I remember watching Pete Sampras win that U.S. Open and his final tournament. And he was also, let's not forget, 7 years younger than Novak. Novak winning Geneva does make you think. Again, he's kind of hit that ability and that belief, but I just don't see it. I just think it's physically, I just don't see the best of 5 over the 2 weeks. He broke down in Australia. I mean, don't forget he beat Alcaraz, right? A few months ago. So he still has game. There's no question. I just don't, I think the odds are really stacked against him with the players who put in the hard yards and have put in the consistent matches. And I don't think he's the player that he was. And there's a little core of belief. It's not there anymore, but if he does get it rolling, there will be that intimidation factor will come back very quickly. There'll be that specter that John talked about. People haven't forgotten what he can be. And that's worth a few points on big matches for sure, but I don't see it.
How far do you think he will go? I think that's an interesting query, right? How far do you think he will go in the tournament?
Looking at the draw, I mean, I think he's going to probably face Medvedev in the 4th round. There's a good chance he will. I think he'd win that match on clay if he's feel relatively fresh. But then I think he's got to face Zverev probably in the next round. Zverev hasn't had a great season on the clay, but it's kind of the back-to-back matches and bouts, John. I think he goes to the 4th round or the quarters, but no further, personally.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think?
I was thinking quarters when I formulated that question. That it was the first thing that popped into my head. That he would go quarters. I think he could. I think he could take Zverev. Certainly, based on ability and past performance, but I think Zverev is still at a point where he's questioning, and Novak knows. I think that's a big difference. It's a big difference. So,
Zverev has been so close, hasn't he? At Roland Garros, he's sustained that horrible ankle injury a couple of years ago against Rafa in an exceptional match, and just looking for his first major. He's desperate, isn't he, Zverev?
But Candy, it could be Medvedev, Zverev, Sinner, Alcaraz.
Is that what you're going for, Chris?
I'm just saying that's what it could be on the. I'm not saying that's what it's going to be. That's certainly that's a lot of back-to-back for that stage of his career. That a whole lot of stuff lately, but I agree with you. I think if Novak makes the second week, I think
I'd be very happy for him. I just can't see it at the moment. And I hope that he proves me wrong. I do, because like Mark, I'd love to see him win just one more and then maybe call it a day at that point. Let's wrap up, guys, because I've had you very graciously for an hour and 20 minutes. Chris Clarey, John Williams and Mark Gellard. Anything you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to ask each other, perhaps, just as we finish up?
Well, I'll just say to John, good luck this week. And I know, these weeks are stressful for everybody, and this is why we coach and play. And this is the ultimate arena. And I think sometimes we have to, as much as we want to win everything, you have to take a moment to enjoy this, because you don't know how many more times you're going to be here. You're at the pinnacle of the sport right now, so it's you have to sometimes just take a moment, because I certainly know I know I do.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mark. Thank you, and I will extend the same to both you and the entire Lynette team. It is a lot of stress, and one of the things that I try to do for sure is enjoy every moment, because we don't know. Last year we missed this because Taylor rolled her ankle in Rabat. First point of the first match of the first game. And so we were not here last year at this time, and just to be back here this year at this time, especially in lieu of what we had to deal with this year, has been super impactful reminder of how we should be appreciative of the little stuff. So
to be a coach, I think, at a major is just extraordinary. So well done to you both. To be a journalist and a writer as well at one of the biggest tournaments in the world, Chris. So also a huge credit to you. You are massively talented. Do you think, in one word, chaps, let's just go round, is Roland Garros the hardest major to win? Now, obviously, it depends on whether you've grown up on clay, but overall, would you say for you, Mark, and for you, Coach John Williams, with your players, is this Roland Garros the hardest one? Mark?
Yes.
John?
Strictly from a physical perspective, I would say yes.
And Chris, if you were playing Roland Garros, would this be the hardest major for you to win?
Oh, there's no question. I didn't play much on clay, green or red or yellow or anything when I was growing up. But I would just say there's no question that the clay court game is strategic still, and it's a grind to get through it. But I think just the conditions of playing, especially in New York, with all those commutes and just the general crush of the crowd and the whole vibe. It's the end of the season. People are drained at that stage. To me, that seems like psychologically a little bit harder than winning the French in general. There's just a whole atmosphere issue that comes into play that doesn't come into play in Paris. And I do think that the game is such a challenge physically and mentally now, especially with these long Masters 1000s that are in place. So I would go with the US Open maybe being the hardest, but that's just me.
We've got rowdy crowds at the US Open and at Roland Garros. It's going to get rowdy out there. It's going to be a great tournament. Mark, again, and John, the very best of luck. Mark, perhaps say goodbye to everyone watching on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for watching and listening. And thanks, guys, for joining us.
Yeah, John, thank you very much. Good luck to Taylor against Elisabetta Cocciaretto.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Chris, have a brilliant time. And I hope you sell lots more copies of your book, The Warrior, written about the great Rafa Nadal.
Thank you, Candy.
All right, this is Candy signing off. You've been watching Roland Garros live with us here on Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. Keep your questions coming. Keep watching the podcast. John and I have got a new podcast coming out all about how the blueprints for being a great champion. Mark and I regularly speak to great coaches, neurologists, all kinds of people, physio, strength and conditioning, and racket stringers week in, week out. We continue to love your company. And Chris, we'd love to get you on the podcast in the future. So thanks all. Have a really good evening and the best of luck for the 2 weeks of Roland Garros. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay.